Do you want to hit record? Welcome back, everyone. I'm Susan Jodry. I'm the Director of Partnership and Learner Engagement with Beyond the Professoriate. And I'm joined again today by my colleague, Dr. Diane Sepakishi. And Diane's going to be keeping watch of the chat area and the Q&A area. And we do our best to answer as many questions as possible, but you have lots of questions, which is good. You're curious. And so there might be some questions that don't get answered. If that's the case, you can always send us an email, and Diane will share the email address as well. And we should have some time at the end to answer any of the more common questions. Because today we're going to talk about using LinkedIn as well as some other online tools in your job search. Some of this might seem a little obvious for some of you, especially if you are people in the computer sciences. But we've noticed that, especially with the introduction of generative AI, that sometimes people are wondering what different tools do and what to use. So today we're going to start by considering those different online tools that serve a variety of purposes and may or may not be effective to use for different parts of your job search. So it's about choosing which online tools are going to work for you. Then we are going to focus on LinkedIn because it's a platform that's specifically designed for career-focused activity and connections. And then finally, are there strategies for aligning your online presence with employers' expectations? So we're going to look at how to manage our online presence during a job search. So lots of different areas of online use. But to start, we're going to take a look at the type of online tools you might use during your job search. And depending on your goals and the information that you're looking for, you're going to find that some tools are more useful than others for different parts of your search. So like I said, some of you will probably know a lot about some of these tools, or at least a little about all of these tools. But I'm going to go through the different types of resources that will support you in your job search. And like I said, you're probably familiar with most or all of them, and some of you will know more than I do about some of these tools. But starting with search engines. So this might seem like, oh yeah, I know what a search engine is. But it's important to understand how some of these tools work so you can make the best choices. So with a search engine, web crawlers explore the web regularly to find pages that are then added to a large database. And so from your search request that you make in that search bar, the database is searched for the most relevant results. Now, relevancy could be determined by a number of various factors, and that could include information like where you live, so your location, the language you use, or even the device that you're using. So whether you're using your desktop or using your phone can change what kind of results that you receive from the search engine, but it's a database. And the other thing, I know search engines have changed a bit in the last couple years. So even, there's some paid sponsors. So you do have to scroll a little bit further than you used to find the results that might be most relevant for you. So that's something else to keep in mind when you're using a search engine. But overall, creating this database, and then it pulls from that database. And of course, websites, and you're like, I know what a website is. But again, it'll be important for what I tell you later. So websites definitely created to provide information to the public. You obviously access that information by navigating to the website using a specific web address. Now we have generative AI. And generative AI is a machine learning model or large language model, and it's trained to create new data. So it works very differently from a search engine because it's not really retrieving information. So instead, these tools learn to create more objects that replicate the data that they're trained on. And Gen AI has been trained on an enormous amount of data, most of it publicly available on the internet, which can at times make it unreliable. And then finally, we have professional platforms. And today we're going to focus on LinkedIn because it's currently the largest career-focused platform. But LinkedIn is created to connect professionals to other professionals And it uses algorithms influenced by your site activity to personalize your experience. And I'll talk more about that when we talk specifically about LinkedIn. So it's really important to understand how the tools work because during your job search, you're going to want to select the best online tool for the goal that you have. You're busy. You don't want to waste your time on ineffective strategies. So you want to start by considering what it is that you hope to achieve. For example, are you looking for accurate information? If accuracy is important, you're going to want to get as close to the source of the information as possible. Are you looking for specific information? Again, you're going to want to locate reliable sources from trustworthy experts. And what's great is you all have backgrounds in research, so you understand how to assess whether or not a source is going to be credible and trustworthy. Does the task require contextual nuance? Because maybe if it requires nuance, like something like a cover letter or resume, you want to start by creating a draft before you go looking for some inspiration or feedback. And so, if you're hoping to get some inspiration, maybe the main goal is to generate some ideas, then you might use something like generative AI to gain some inspiration about document creation or considering questions for interviews. Those might be some examples for getting inspired. But it's really important that not all of those generative AI tools are equal. So free tools are often less reliable than paid tools, and not all generative AI is as reliable as others, regardless of free versus paid. You also want to take a look at when the tool, so those generative AI tools, were trained because the training most likely won't be entirely up to date. And I'll talk more about how that could be a problem in a second. Or maybe you're looking for some feedback on an idea or document that you've created, and perhaps generative AI can assist with that. Excuse me. So these are the types of questions you should ask around what your desired outcome is when you're starting to use some online tools or deciding between which tools to start with. So let's say you're looking for some really specific information. Perhaps you're collecting information on economic trends. So this is information that you hope is going to be specific and accurate. So you're probably going to want to start with a search engine, which will hopefully provide you with a number of reliable websites, like say the state or provincial dashboard, maybe other government databases, or economic news like from NPR or Reuters. Then, if you wanted to, you could consult with generative AI about economic trends to see if it has any additional insights. However, depending on when the tool was trained, the created responses could be out of date. So you can prompt a Gen AI chatbot to retrieve updated info, but you need to specifically prompt for that retrieval. It won't always automatically do that. Another example could be looking for industry-specific expectations. So, starting with a search engine makes a lot of sense for this type of specific information. But LinkedIn can also be a great resource to research what's happening in specific industries. So you can consult job ads as well as follow or connect with leaders and people who currently work in that industry. And you'll probably find what you're looking for without using generative AI. It's good to be cautious about asking generative AI for career expectations because if the chatbot perceives you as a woman, it will provide you with suggestions that are different than if it perceives you as a man. So this is just one example of the prejudices that are currently ingrained in those systems. One more example. You need to find an employee's name and title. This is specific information that you don't want to get wrong, especially if you're reaching out to them for an informational interview or if you're submitting an application to a position, you want to make sure you get their job or their name correct. Start with the company website. Many companies list employees on their website, or you can check out LinkedIn. Many people have LinkedIn profiles, even if they're not always active users. And just to kind of talk a little bit more about LinkedIn, it can be a great place to gather information about a career path or industry. So if you think about how LinkedIn is designed. It has specific sections where people share information. I'm going to talk about those sections in the second part of today's webinar. So on company profiles, you can learn about employers of interest, trends in the industry and products and services. There are job advertisement and opportunities. You can use the advanced search feature to target industries, education institutions, companies, or you can refine your search by country or city. This is really helpful if you want a job search in a place where you're not currently living, which was one of the questions we had yesterday. Then comments and reactions, where people can share information or respond to posts and comments. People post things. This is where users can share ideas, articles, resources, products, and services. And there are opportunities for professionals to connect with the people that they know or want to know, so those connections. You can send connection requests to grow your professional community, or you can join groups, either in a specific career field or alumni network. And checking out individual employee profiles can help you in building your own. Like I said, I'm going to give you some examples today, but you can also use LinkedIn to see how other people have created their profile in the career field that you want to move into. And you can send messages to people you know or want to get to know. And this can be a way also to reach out for informational interviews. So this is the variety of ways that you can use LinkedIn for information gathering. One more specific example for selecting the most effective online tools for your job search. Maybe you're ready to start building your professional community. We talked about networking yesterday. So if you are researching companies to find people to network with, you can start with a search engine that's going to direct you to specific websites, and that will provide you with the most accurate and specific information. When you're researching careers, you can start with a company website. That's going to most likely be the specific and accurate source of information for finding employees to connect with. And as previously mentioned, many people have LinkedIn profiles, and the platform is specifically designed to connect professionals to one another. So using LinkedIn to build your professional network can be very effective because it's part of the expectation of the site. And then if you'd like to consult with generative AI, you could prompt it to find other people in your location or potential events and where that are happening where you live so that you can go out and meet people. Again, if you're using generative AI for that, you're going to want to make sure that the information isn't correct. It hasn't hallucinated an event that happened, I don't know, 5 years ago, or might be happening with a similar title or event name. So you will need to do and just check and make sure that those events are real and happening. And then writing informational interview requests. All right, you want to reach out to someone, ask them for 20 to 30 minutes of their time so you can ask questions about what they do in their work, how they got into their job. Well, we have sample templates in the Beyond the Professoriate platform, so you could start there. And then you could use your brain. You want the request to be sincere and personal. But if you want some feedback on tone or language, you could definitely consult with generative AI. Generative AI is still an emerging technology, so it's really good to remember what it can and can't do. So what can it do? Well, it can be used to support your job search. These tools can be used to summarize a job ad and help identify the types of skills an employer might be looking for. Can also analyze job descriptions and suggest different language that aligns with your resume and the position requirements. It's possible to use AI to help you format your resume, which is going to require you to give the tool access to your work history. However, it might not be able to accurately craft important impact statements. So you always want to edit whatever generative AI suggests because you also don't want to sound like generative AI. And AI can help job seekers identify and maybe fix spelling, grammatical, and word usage errors in their resumes and cover letters. But there are also other tools that are intended for specifically that purpose, and those tools might provide a better result. There are many things that generative AI can't do. So it can't contextualize your transferable skills or the common themes in your experience, that's going to be relevant to a specific job ad and company. So, for example, it's not going to be able to recognize different types of facilitation experience in different employment roles or settings. So it wouldn't necessarily be able to make the connection between similar experiences and skills in different work environments. Like if you have any teaching experience, generative AI probably wouldn't be able to recognize the transferable skills like curriculum development, facilitation, public speaking, or providing feedback. It's also very important that your application documents accurately reflect your experiences and abilities. So if you make it to the interview, it's really important that you can talk about the claims that you've made in those application documents. Generative AI tools rely on what exists, on the data it consumes, which isn't always current or evolving. So AI can't yet anticipate new or emerging industry trends. It might include outdated ideas, terminology, or industry standards if it is putting together a cover letter or resume. And so this could make you look like you weren't knowledgeable about emerging trends in the career field. And because it draws on these existing data sets to create a new object, it can't communicate your personal passion for a role or your cultural fit for an organization. And that lack of narrative, even in a resume, could cost you opportunities to make your application stand out. And finally, generative AI is unable to provide a nuance of your career path, which really matters for PhDs and postdocs, especially if your work experience looks different than more traditional candidates in a specific industry. So, an unconventional career path that doesn't have that linear or direct industry experience requires a unique personal approach and maybe slightly different wording than what generative AI is going to suggest. And just a few other additional considerations before you use generative AI, thinking about, is it worth my time? It takes time to consider useful prompts and to modify those prompts and provide the tool with any relevant materials. It's possible that you could complete the task much more quickly and more effectively on your own. Will it help me? Well, some tools are better than others, as I mentioned, and free tools are still improving. It could be helpful for some quality control, like spelling errors or formatting, but then there's also a chance that it's going to suggest errors. So don't forget that generated content often resembles everything the tool has previously encountered, which can replicate biases. So you want to think about how much close editing that you want to do of a document that might contain multiple inaccuracies. And then thinking about your privacy tolerance. So many of us, I'd say most of us, are used to giving up some of our privacy to use tech products. Once you submit information to a generative AI tool, it's likely going to be used to improve the tool and then used as the developer deems appropriate. So you're probably not going to want to use generative AI to help you format a creative portfolio for jobs that require any sample work as part of the application. Relying on user-submitted documents to train AI could also result in privacy and security breaches. So data isn't always stored on servers that meet specific national or regional standards. It's good to take the time to read any terms and conditions before using a generative AI tool. And in fact, OpenAI, the Canadian government, which is where I am, has just done inquiry and recognized that, especially in the early years of ChatGPT, they were not meeting the privacy requirements of the country of Canada. And then finally, do I have sustainability goals? Well, Gen AI tools right now rely on massive resource extraction. So data center computers run hot, they require water to keep them cool, and the growing water consumption is becoming a challenge for host communities, as well as energy use too. So if you're someone who's trying to improve your environmental stewardship, you might want to think carefully about whether you want to or you need to use generative AI for certain tasks. So now we've talked about different online tools that many of us have been using, or some of them are more emerging. I want to look specifically at LinkedIn and how to effectively complete your profile. So as I mentioned, LinkedIn is primarily a professional career platform, and it allows users to learn about potential jobs, different career paths, different companies, and connect with people of interest who work in career fields that align with a user's career goals. And when I use the word professional, what I really mean is career focused and separate from sharing a lot of detailed personal life or maybe cultivating an online lifestyle brand. So the professional nature, the career focused nature of LinkedIn makes it different from other social media sites where the goal is often constant personal exposure and promotion. But like social media sites, LinkedIn uses your activity to curate your feed and make recommendations based on who you interact with and what posts you interact with. So these are a few elements that make a LinkedIn profile good. It describes who you are as a professional. It highlights your top marketable skills, and those are your technical skills and your interpersonal skills. You highlight any core personal qualities that maybe make you unique, provide evidence of how you've applied your skills, and of course, including relevant work and educational experiences. So now I'm going to talk a bit about the different pieces of the profile and give you some tips on how to flesh out those pieces in effective ways. Starting with the LinkedIn headline, that's right below your name. And by default, it's going to be your current job title, which won't be helpful if you're still a student because it'll indicate the job you have and not the job you want. So you'll need to edit that section. The goal of the headline is to describe what you do in a way that entices the reader to click on your profile and learn more. If you're making the transition out of academia into a non-academic career, describing your academic work or subject matter expertise won't be an effective strategy for connecting with other professionals. And that's looking backward as well. And as I mentioned on Monday, employers are interested in your skills and what you can do. And so that's why describing that subject matter expertise isn't as relevant for non-academic employers. A much more successful strategy is to use some keywords that describe the core skills you hope to use in your new job. And you want to entice the reader to click on your profile and learn more. And it's going to be forward-looking, thinking about where you want to move in your career. So here's an example of what I mean. An unsuccessful use of the headline section that highlights your field or study of academic work, for example, could be graduate student in anthropology or postdoctoral researcher at school X. When you're moving out of academia, a more successful headline uses industry-specific terms and is more descriptive. So I'm going to show you some examples. Social scientist, aspiring UX researcher, program analyst. All right, tells you a little bit about what the person can do and where they want to move next. Software development, project management, Python, climatology, and climate science. So again, you might have very specific subject matter expertise within climate science, but making it more broad means it'll be more recognizable and understandable to a non-academic audience. And then machine learning engineer, health tech, biotech. There are more examples in the course and the lessons in the platform as well. The About section tells a story about your career that's going to communicate a trajectory. So it should communicate your key skills, values, and personal qualities. Those are foundational to your career. It tells a positive story of career change, so it draws you to a specific career field, not why you're leaving academia. Uses the language of industry to describe your skills. And it includes the types of opportunities you want to pursue. And it also includes interpersonal skills, personal characteristics to make you stand out as a candidate. And here's one example. This is the LinkedIn About section from a PhD in rhetoric and scientific communication. It says, I'm a writer, educator, and technical editor who can translate complex ideas into clear, engaging, and accessible presentations and reports, tailoring content for diverse audiences and contexts. My professional and academic life, my mission is to promote care for each other and the worlds we inhabit through the use of reflective and intention-driven communication practices, and to teach others to do the same. As a communicator with expertise in writing and research, I have a ready disposition for interdisciplinary dialogue. I have a commitment to practices that are just and sustainable, the patience to persist in long-term projects, and the diligence to carry out my tasks in thoughtful and responsive ways. I'm an enthusiastic collaborator, an active and a supportive mentor, and a passionate proponent of ongoing learning. I do love the patience to persist in long-term projects. Such a nice way to say I completed a PhD, right? When you're doing your dissertation or you're working on a research project, you are persisting through a long-term project. And that type of language is something a non-academic employer is going to understand. Again, we have lots more examples in the lessons in the platform. Finally, I want to talk about the experience section of a LinkedIn profile because the main goal of this section is to provide an expansive view of your work experience and who you are as a professional. So it feels like the resume section of a profile, but you don't want to just cut and paste from your resume and definitely not from your CV. You want to avoid describing academic work experience in language that's going to be unfamiliar to employers outside of academia. So successful experience section translates your academic work experience into the language of non-academic employers. And if you know what career field you want to enter, you're going to want to adopt the language that's used in that field so that employers can make sense of what you've done. It uses industry keywords and includes information that's similar to a resume, but it doesn't need to be as detailed. And then any academic experience is carefully curated depending on the career field you're interested in. So you're most likely not going to list all your publications because that doesn't really tell an employer all the things, good things that you had to do in order for those publications to exist. So again, there are more examples in the lessons in the platform and in the workbook, but I'm going to give you one example now. This person, their title was research consultant. Maybe this was a research assistantship and they've used consultant instead of assistantship, and that's fine, their organization, and when they held that position. And then they've got some impact statements. It says designed end-to-end qualitative research projects, including hosting focus groups, interviews, online and in-person, polls, statistics, analysis, data visualization, and final reports. Delivered custom tailored presentations to senior decision makers, including local, regional, and federal policymakers, federal agencies, ESG investigators, academic conferences, and international political nonprofits. Earned national media coverage, including the New York Times, Bloomberg, Business Insider, and Recode, and then published academic and public audience articles and book chapters. All right. There we go. All right. Your LinkedIn profile is going to change as you move through each step of a job search. So you may have looked at those examples and thought, whoa, those are really robust. Someone's obviously thought a lot about the things that they've done and how they're going to create their LinkedIn profile. So this is going to change over time. And we've identified kind of 4 stages of a job search. And in the platform, we have step 1, step 2, step 3, and then step 4 is kind of part of that step 3. So that's stage 4, that build stage. So in the first step, that discovery stage, when your goal is to identify that optimal career pathway and what it is that you love and what it is that you can do and what people will pay you for, at that point, you're probably using LinkedIn to research companies of interest, evaluate profiles for key skills, and identify your most marketable skills. Then in step 2, that research stage, your goal is to discover different career paths of interests that align with your values, strengths, and interests. You're doing some research, and the lessons in step 2 guide you through how to do that research. At this point, you're probably going to design a more compelling LinkedIn profile. You're growing your network, and you're researching your career options. And then after you've moved to those discover and research stages, then you're going to start implementing that job search. Your goal is to continue to build that network, and then you're going to be actively applying for jobs. So at this stage, you're probably going to rewrite your LinkedIn profile. You're going to be networking and sharing information with people and finding and applying for positions. And then that last stage, when you're finally started working in a new career and you're building your career, you're going to stay current in industry trends and find new opportunities for growth and advancement. And you're going to maintain that LinkedIn profile. You're sharing information with colleagues. This is how you maintain that professional community, those relationships, and build your network and find new opportunities. So you can also think about it this way. In that discovery step, that's step one, your profile is going to be like a basic kind of social media profile. You're following thought leaders, connections with people you know, highlighting the job you have and not the job you want. But then as you're doing more research in that step two, you're going to have a profile. It still might be kind of minimal, but it's going to include basic information like your name, your profile picture, academic work experience, and marketable skills. While you're doing that research, you're probably going to also be editing your LinkedIn profile. So when you get to that implementation stage, it's going to be a much more specialist profile. All the sections are going to be completed. They're going to highlight your most marketable skills, and it's going to be applicable to select career pathways and options. So you focus down on the career path that you want. And then after you've been hired into your career and you're building your career, it's going to stay as that specialist profile. But you're going to, again, you're going to modify it from time to time. You're using targeted language that communicates how your skills, experience, and knowledge is applicable to your one specific industry. There's some really simple ways to avoid common mistakes. You want to complete that about section. You're going to want to position yourself as a professional and not a student or an academic. You're thinking about presenting yourself for the job you want, not the one you already have. You're showing how you applied your skills with success. You're going to keep it professional and career focused. And you don't just want to litter it with keywords. You still want to create a narrative and make it enticing to persuade people to read your profile. I'm going to end today with talking a little bit about kind of your online presence generally, but also related to LinkedIn. So how is it that you can align your career-focused online presence with employers' expectations? How can you maintain and enhance your presence online? So your online presence really includes anything from your personal social media accounts to the results that are returned from a search engine. And depending on your online presence and the jobs you're applying for, you might want to consider locking some of your social media accounts, for example. Also remember, and here's an example from my life, I stopped using Twitter around the time it became X, and there was like a mass exodus to other social media sites. And I've since deleted my account, my former Twitter account, but some of my tweets still have ghost lives in the search engines. So when you say, put my name into a search engine, sometimes you get results that were my tweets from ages ago that don't even really exist anymore. So there's a long memory online. And so you want to reflect on who is your audience and how much do you really want them to know about you? When you're posting, thinking, would a stranger understand this post or misunderstand my intention and meaning? And just remind yourself that not every thought you have is gold. So you want to think carefully about what you would share with an employer. So a professional or career-focused profile plays a number of roles in your job search. It does allow you to connect with others who are in careers you're interested in, which is really important for moving into a new career path. You can research career fields and identify career paths that are interesting for you. You're researching different companies and organizations where you might want to work. You get to showcase your skills to potential employers and colleagues, which can be especially advantageous if your chosen field requires any portfolios or practical demonstration of skills. And I find that online platforms can help me organize my application materials or portfolios. So even keeping my LinkedIn profile and making it up to date means I also have a record of the things that I have done. So when I'm putting together, say, an application package, oh, I've got a record of the things that I've done, and I'm just going to add more detail for the resume. You don't need a million online profiles, and you don't need to spend endless amounts of time updating, posting, and creating content. When we think about potential employment, it's really important to be intentional about our online interactions. So you're going to consider the content you post. I happen to have a partner who is very excellent at adding a sober second thought when I'm unsure how something might come across or how people might interpret what I've written. So if you're doubtful about posting something, it's probably a good indication that maybe you shouldn't, or at least you should take some time to think about it. If you post extremely personal content, you're probably going to connect with like-minded folks, but you might close the door with employers. So this is kind of that echo chamber effect that many people refer to. The internet is mostly about connection. Like we even talk about it using the language of network. So it's really important to consider what doors you want to open when you're posting content or even replying to others' posts. So carefully evaluating your motivations for engagement and post content accordingly for building your professional presence. Thinking too about sharing a post, it's a great way to connect with other users, but you also, again, want to consider the message that you send by the post you share. Is it something that you'd say in a job interview? Maybe resist the urge of posting a lot of personal photos publicly, no matter how fun they are. It's unlikely that they're going to enhance your employability. So you might want to think about it this way. If you were working, would you want your boss to see those pictures? And if the answer is no, you just keep them offline. And then often social media event lists are public unless it's a private event. So again, also being mindful of what you're RSVPing to and who might see it and if that matters. I've already mentioned, it's a good idea to adopt that language of the professional workspace. This is just a reminder that, academic and business language, they're equal. One's not better than the other. They're just used in different sectors. So you're describing the skills you use to complete projects and deliverables, and you're providing evidence of how you applied your skills, not a list of your accomplishments. There are a number of resources in the platform that are going to help you identify and translate your skills. And you can use LinkedIn to identify the language of a particular industry. But this is going to definitely be an expectation of non-academic employers that you're going to use the language of the career field that you want to move into. It shows that you've done some homework and you actually understand and are knowledgeable about that career field. The expectation is also that you're going to contribute to building that community of professionals that Diane talked about yesterday. So connecting with people who have career paths you're interested in, maybe connecting with alumni from your university. If you're moving out of academia, you don't want to connect with too many academics because LinkedIn is just going to present you with more academics to connect with, and the suggestions won't be as effective for you. Sharing those posts and resources, you don't have to create long personal posts. In fact, less can often be more when it comes to sharing because LinkedIn is not about self-promotion. It's about those strategic connections. So you've no need to try and become a job influencer. And in fact, that's going to take time away from your job search. Commenting on relevant posts, great way to connect with people and maintain connections. Using the celebration function, LinkedIn will prompt you to celebrate your connection's career milestones. It's a nice thing to do. And of course, you can always just react to posts that enhance your understanding of a career field by using those reaction emojis. And you want to be strategic. Again, you're training the algorithm to send you suggestions that are going to make sense for the career field you want to move into. And those comments and reactions are going to be seen by everyone. And in fact, sometimes people will get emails that will say, oh, your contact reacted to this post. And then you go and look at the post because LinkedIn thinks you want to see it. Just before we get to questions, I'm going to share ways to avoid failed LinkedIn strategies. So sometimes people think by just having the LinkedIn profile, they're going to be contacted by recruiters for a job. This is extremely rare, especially if you're newly out of university and haven't built any sort of progressive work experience. So it wasn't until I was holding a full-time position as a director that anyone ever cold contacted me about applying for a position. So alerting me to a position that was open. They weren't offering me a job. It's just that my title and years of experience aligned with someone who they might want to hire, and they're inviting me to apply. Building that profile is just the first step. You also should actively engage on the platform to use it as an effective tool and train those algorithms so you get to see what you want to see. Another problem is connecting with no objective. Sometimes people try to connect, but there's no great reason. So LinkedIn is a space for building a community of professionals, and you want to connect with purpose and follow up. This is part of building those relationships. Someone asked yesterday, like, how do you make it not feel transactional? And I know Diane talked about that, but this is part of it. You're going to continue to nurture those relationships. And then transactional. So that's again about nurturing the relationships. Relationships involve giving and receiving. So people in your professional network are going to provide you with information, but you also should thank them, but also provide them with information as well. So you don't want to reach out to people just when a job is posted. You want to have cultivated those relationships ahead of time. All right, I'm going to stop share and see if we have any questions. Oh, there you are, Diane.
Yes, I know. I'm always trying to move the screens around so I can see now. So there are a couple of questions comes in. Folks just thinking about, other things, other parts of their job search. So I definitely recommended that they send us an email if they'd like us to follow up with some of those additional questions that are a little bit outside the scope for today. So please feel free to do that. But some things that were coming up that I think are common questions for a lot of folks. Um, are there any other networking platforms other than LinkedIn, or any other ways that you can see approaching networking? Just thinking, some people have privacy concerns, or some folks are just, they don't want the algorithms just doing it all for them or taking all their data and all that stuff. So, do you have any other recommendations? And I can add on a couple too at the end.
Oh, great. So LinkedIn does have privacy settings, like other platforms have privacy settings. So you don't have to be public to everyone all the time. So that's first thing. We talk about LinkedIn because it is the most widely used professional platform. And I would say, especially, I mentioned about Twitter becoming a whole new beast. And at that time, people left that social media platform and went to LinkedIn, which I thought was kind of a weird choice. But at the same time, they're using it to enhance their professional sharing, things that they would have shared professionally on like a microblogging site. Now they're doing on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn, we focus on that one because it is the most effective in North America in terms of a platform. You don't have to have an online presence at all. It's unusual in this day and age for people not to, but you don't need to have an online presence. You can do your networking. I talked at the beginning about which online tools should I use for different purposes. LinkedIn was always kind of like number two on that list for everything. You don't need to use LinkedIn. So if you are building your professional community and you want to do it all through email, that's a possibility. You can call people if you like to use the phone. That's a possibility too. And really, when you're setting up those professional relationships, then you're going to be intentional about nurturing those professional relationships. It's just going to mean that you're going to check in with people via email, like the way that you contacted them the first time. Even with LinkedIn, you're setting up to talk to people, whether that's in person or through video conferencing. So it's more of like an avenue to get to that stage of doing those informational interviews. But that can all be done through email as well. You don't have to have a LinkedIn profile. You had some things to add to that too, Diane, I think.
Yeah, I was just thinking my own institution from my undergrad, like our department has its own networking platform
Oh,
that
that's
it uses
interesting.
and networking that it encourages. For us, it's called 10,000 Coffees. I'm in Canada, so that might just be a Canadian um, company and networking platform that we use, but it's like only for our department and people have to sign up and then you get matched with folks to have networking conversations and you can also look them up. So it's a bit smaller scale, but still allows you to do the networking and still helps you connect with people who have related degrees or related skills. So I would say also check with your, alumni office or your career center to see if they have those kinds of things, set up. They might have their own alumni networking platform or group or something that you can connect to that will help it feel a little bit more personalized and smaller and less large.
Yeah, that's a great example. And I know for a fact that some of our partner institutions have mentoring programs. And so, like Diane said, it might not even be something that's online, but going and talking to your career center, your faculty of graduate studies, or your alumni office and asking them if they have mentorship programs is a really good idea because I don't think all of our partner institutions do, but many do have those types of programs where you get matched up with a mentor. So, yes, that's an excellent suggestion too, Diane. Thank you.
Yeah, and they may seem like they're catered towards undergrads a lot of the time, just because that's a large population. But I've done it before and been matched. I got matched with a postdoc, and we both thought it was just the best match because I was actually able to provide some really great guidance there. Awesome. Thank you. A couple of questions about updating LinkedIn.
Mm.
Some folks have attended sessions this week and realized that their LinkedIn needs some updates in various sections. Is it okay to update it in sections? Do we have to do it all at once? Do you have any guidelines or other tips and strategies for tackling that?
You don't have to do it all at once. And in fact, an idea will come to mind and you'll probably go in and update it and kind of like a rolling way because you'll make a tweak to something and then you're like, oh yeah, that was a good idea. And then you're like, oh yeah, I should add this.
Mhm.
And so it's iterative. And as I mentioned, it will change at different stages of your job search. Or if you are deciding, maybe you get into your first career and you're like, I like this part of the career, but I really wish it was more like something else. And at that point, you'll probably update your LinkedIn account again to reflect the new direction that you want to move in. Because again, I was gonna say it's kind of like a bat signal, but it is a little bit like a bat signal. All of my analogies are Batman. But anyway, it is a little bit like a bat signal because you're like alerting your network to the fact that these are the things you can do, but these are also the things that you may want to do in the future, right? And so, especially if you're moving careers or transitioning from one place to another, it's a good way to give a little hint to the people in your network. You can obviously that's an opportunity to reach out to them and send them an email as well. But by changing your LinkedIn profile, it also sends up kind of a little signal that, oh, you're thinking about a new direction or looking in a new direction too. So no, it doesn't have to be done all at once. You're going to make updates as you go. I said it's not really like a personal blog, but sometimes I post if I've had an op-ed that I think people would be interested in. I post that. And so that has kind of expanded my network a little bit, but also gives people an idea of some of the things that I'm interested in, and that there are other people interested enough in my ideas that they're going to publish them in a public way, like in a newspaper. So you can think and measure, and depending on what stage of your career you're in, you might want to wait to publish those sorts of things in your LinkedIn. But again, it gives people kind of an idea of who you are. That's not too personal, still very professional and career focused. Um, yeah, so I guess overall, it's going to change over time. Did you have things to add
Yeah.
to that too, Diane?
The only thing that I would add is that usually when you make updates, there's an option to notify your network that you've made
Right.
a change. So if you are kind of
That
going
signal.
through and you're like, well, I got to fix this section. I don't want to fix this section. I don't really want people to be seeing that I'm making, five different changes. Just don't click that option. If you're making more changes that Susan was talking about, where you're like, well, I kind of like to alert people that, I'm changing my about section because I'm ready to look for my next role, then maybe, turn that option back on. So there's different ways of quietly making changes in the background or making changes and alerting your network to them. So that's also
Yeah.
something to think about.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Because sometimes too, we get the question like, what if I really don't want people to know that I am transitioning?
Yeah.
You can still write your profile in a way that highlights your skills, that doesn't doesn't engage the bat signal. You don't have
Yep.
to alert everyone.
I like that. Yeah, I like that. Um, we've had a lot of questions about the LinkedIn headline as well, because we want to make that as relevant as possible, and make it as industry focused as possible. But as someone who's like a really new grad student, is it okay to make an update to a LinkedIn headline like right away, or do we have to stay with graduate student for a certain period of time? What are your thoughts on that?
No, no rules. So you you can make sure that you're using that language that's going to make sense for the career field you're moving into, even if you're still a graduate student. And so don't tell any of your supervisors this. But I started my full-time job before I had even finished my dissertation. It's not something your supervisor wants you to do. But anyway, I did it and it worked out and I still completed my PhD. But I had to think about what career path I wanted to move into. I had to think about the way that my LinkedIn profile was set up and the type of language that I was using. And I was looking at a lot of like faculty development and curriculum work. And so using the language of education, obviously, but kind of administrative education and not like academic necessarily education. And so I had not even graduated from my PhD, but my LinkedIn profile would have looked like, oh, yes, this person has moved into educational development or is an educational developer. So you get to choose when and how you put together that profile. But it will be more effective in terms of connecting with people if you're using that language and that vocabulary that makes sense in that career field, because that's where you want to go. And you want to, again, signal to people that you are knowledgeable about that career field too.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think we'll wrap up there. So if we didn't get to your question, please feel free to email us, member@beyondprof.com, and we'd be happy to take some time after the session to get to it. But otherwise, thank you so much for coming to learn today. Thanks, Susan, for that presentation and giving us an overview of all the different tools. And we encourage you to come back tomorrow when our CEO and director, Dr. Maren Wood, will be sharing a presentation for international students that are in attendance and registered for this week. So we do hope that you'll join us for the last session tomorrow.
Have a great day. Take care. Thank you.